Hey there, I'm Paul Kaltenbach, live in Hell's Kitchen, New York City, and you're tuned to International Radio Report, 30 minutes of news about radio on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, July the 13th, 2025. My name's Sheldon, and I am here with Jill, and we have our weekly 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio for you. We thank you for tuning in to us here on CKUT. I have a lot of interesting stories to get to this week, so we'll start off with something about Radio-Canada International. I'm sure everybody's ears will perk up when they hear that. This is an article, actually, that was written by a guest we've had on the show several times, Wojtek, Gwiazda, a former producer, presenter at Radio-Canada International. The article is called "The Case for a Reimagined Radio-Canada International." And this appeared in a publication called Policy Alternatives, which you can find at policyalternatives.ca. The summer issue, Wojtek tells us, of The Monitor, a publication by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, has numerous articles on the CBC, including one on Radio-Canada International, entitled "The Case for a Reimagined Radio-Canada International." The article also appears on RCI Action Committee's webpage. Now, we're not going to read the full article. It's quite lengthy, but we do encourage you to go to either of the links that we'll provide you with to read the complete, very thoughtful article. So here's a couple of the opening paragraphs. He goes on to say, "Imagine a service that anyone in the world can access for free, that not only provides accurate news about Canada, but also world events and Canada's reaction to them. That service is Radio-Canada International. It has existed for 80 years, but lately its impact has been severely damaged by the lack of understanding at the CBC domestic service of what an international service is and should be. So why have a public broadcast service conceived for people outside of Canada? There's the altruistic reason. In an age of misinformation, RCI is well placed to give accurate, honest, non-biased news and information programming. Canada is seen as a country of good people, perhaps a bit timid about self-promotion, but trustworthy. There's the self-interest. Unless it's a cold front or a tariff war, there's little information about Canada that is consistently accessible to people around the world, particularly without a paywall. And as any sociologist, economist, artist, politician, or business person will tell you, the first step to a successful relationship with someone is knowing something about them. That's why RCI needs a major restructuring to get back to its roots. Right at the center, there has to be a strong professional newsroom of English and French journalists putting together regularly timed newscasts and news copy clearly aimed at people outside of Canada. This would be the foundation on which different language sections within RCI would build upon, not only translating, but adding the additional information needed for any specific country or region to which they provide programming. And that's what RCI used to do. It doesn't do that any longer. It basically takes English and French domestic news services, they translate them into a few foreign languages, and they're only available online. That's a real problem in itself in parts of the world. And like he says in this piece, and you'll go on if you read the rest of it, he builds a very, very strong case for, particularly in these days, the way things are going on the world scene, the need for putting a service like the old RCI back on the air. Will that ever happen? I don't know. It would have to be different. It would have to be delivered in a different manner because basically the transmitter site is not there any longer in Sackville. They could share time with some other broadcasters, I guess. But whether it will happen, whether the funding will ever come forward for it again, whether they will bring in new people to work on specialized programming targeting particular audiences around the world, I kind of think it's probably not going to happen, but you never know. I think, Wojtek has been very strong at pushing this, and maybe now's the right time to really push it hard because of everything that's going on around the world.
You know what? I've never seen so many comments people telling me, please bring back Radio Canada International. We need it. We need that voice for several reasons. Some people say we need that voice because we can't trust our own voices anymore. So we need something from Canada that, we can trust and listen to. I would also think, you know what, if you use relays from some other country for shortwave, for example, I think a service for Radio Canada International could come back today and cost a lot less than what it used to cost, because you don't have a transmitter to maintain. You don't have to have all these people there to keep it running. You are just renting airtime, which for a lot of the transmitters seem to be at a quite a low price. And you got your voice back on shortwave. All you need is to find your staff, find a way of doing the programming, which I think would be not that complicated. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that'd be willing and saying, I want to join a team that will bring this back on the air.
Really, staff-wise, I think they'd only need some international journalists, English and French service, because the foreign language services that are there have qualified journalists. It's simply they don't have the ability to create their own programming. They're simply being handed domestic programming and basically translating it into their languages for their overseas audiences. But how many of those overseas audiences are listening because it's not available on shortwave? Probably a much smaller number than it used to be when it was on the radio. Anyways, please go and read the full article. And there are, particularly for Canadians, there are some suggestions in there of what you can do. You can write to your member of parliament, talk about this article. Maybe, there's a whole new group of people in parliament in Ottawa now. And, a lot of the people that were there that are there now probably know nothing about the old RCI. Maybe they don't know anything about the current RCI either. So I think it's a good time to make them aware of it, and particularly with the times that are going on in the world right now.
In our next news item, Texas stations provide vital personal connection during nonstop flood coverage. This is via Inside Radio. Coverage of the tragic flooding that hit 6 central Texas counties over the Independence Day weekend, causing widespread damage and loss of lives, again showed that when it comes to breaking local news, radio doesn't take a holiday. Stations in and around San Antonio and Austin, markets such as iHeartMedia's News Radio 1200 AM, WOAI San Antonio, immediately shifted to emergency broadcast mode and round-the-clock coverage of the flooding, which affected Texas. From the beginning of the crisis, our iHeartMedia teams did what our people do best. They immediately showed up to serve and support the communities in which they live and work. iHeartMedia's chairman and CEO Bob Pittman and president, COO, and CFO Rich Bressler said in a joint statement, "As people turned to us in the middle of the crisis, looking for clarity, connection, and answers, our teams worked round the clock to keep their listeners informed and safe, cutting through misinformation and chaos with their trusted local voices." iHeart's release notes that the company's stations have provided support and vital personal connection to listeners affected by the flooding, while station sites have become lifelines, evacuation routes, boil water alerts, road closures, shelter locations, and ways to help. We've expanded coverage across all of Texas and into the Louisiana markets now. Stations in San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, El Paso, New Orleans, and Baton Rouge will help ensure that residents can receive the information and support they need. In Houston, Michael Berry, morning host of News Talk KTRH AM 740, covered the storm's aftermath, families affected by the devastation, and the resilient spirit of Texas. iHeartMedia Division Executive Vice President Programming Mark Sherman tells Insider Radio, "We are so proud of our people on the ground," iHeart's statesman says. "The true power of broadcast radio is our teams. unwavering commitment to serving their communities, which is never more important than in times like this of unthinkable tragedy and loss. The importance of radio, once again, we say it all the time, and this should be taken care of. Look at all these AM stations coming through.
It's really noteworthy that both of those stations mentioned in the article are AM stations. I think they are both clear channel stations. Definitely WOAI. The other one, I'm not 100% sure, but giving them very wide coverage. A lot of FM stations these days are automated, voice tracking announcers and what have you, if there's any announcers at all. So these news talk stations are there with people around the clock that can cover events like this. And having the wide reach of an AM signal is really, really important. So the people taking that final vote on making those radios mandatory needs to look at stories like this to see just how important these stations are. Our next story is another story about unlicensed broadcasting. The FCC investigates Sweet Home, Oregon unlicensed FM broadcast. This is by Nick Langan of Radioworld. Radioworld has covered recent notices the FCC Enforcement Bureau sent to property owners in New York City about unlicensed broadcasts, but it is also investigating a complaint in the town of Sweet Home, Oregon, demonstrating that they sometimes occur in small-town America, too. Known as the gateway to the Santiam River Playground, Sweet Home has a population of 9,828 and is about 75 miles south of Portland. In April, agents of the Enforcement Bureau's Portland office detected a broadcast on 92.1 FM from a property on Nadina Street. Lynn County, Oregon, tax records identified Sam Marshall as the property owner, according to the Commission's report. Agents determined the transmission observed exceeded Part 15 limits. Marshall has 10 days to respond to the notice that was sent on July the 1st, confirming that the broadcast has ceased and identifying the source of the transmissions. Under the 2020 Pirate Act, the Commission can issue a fine of around $2.5 million if it determines that unlicensed broadcasts are continuing after sending the pirate letter. So even in small town now, somebody's taken a risk of putting an illegal station on the air. Maybe they thought nobody would notice, but they have seemed to track it down to a town with under 10,000 people in it. So it doesn't say what they were broadcasting. It would be interesting to know. But 92.1, they usually tend to be often down in that lower end of the FM band. So check around your town and city. You never know what might be out there. Some of these stations apparently sound very professional, so you may not know you're listening to an unlicensed station in some cases. But this one they've at least tracked down. Now, whether it's the property owner that was operating it or somebody a tenant in his property remains to be seen.
In our next story, Dollywood launches a streaming radio station featuring park music by Camruinn, Morgan-Rumsey, WVLT TV. This is via Radioworld. So from Sevierville, Tennessee, WVLT, Dollywood, the Dolly Parton theme park, has launched a radio station, jam-packed with iconic Dolly Parton tracks and picks from some of the country superstars' favorite artists. Dollywood Radio launched on July 7th, streaming on the iHeart Radio website and app, and features music heard in the park and special shout-outs from Dolly. Dolly Parton is a living legend, and now her music, the music she loves, and the fun of her Dollywood theme park all have a dedicated home on iHeart's Dollywood Radio, hosted by Dolly herself. iHeartMedia's president and programming operations and digital music, John Zellner, this new station captures the heart and soul of the Smoky Mountains, featuring a hand-picked blend of country classics, bluegrass, folk, and songs by some of Dolly's dearest friends in music. That sounds interesting. It's fun. A theme park and a radio station that goes with the theme of the park and Dolly Parton. I always find it interesting when you also listen to picks from artists themselves. What do they listen to? What do they like?
Yeah, that's something that there's a number of stations on Sirius XM that do that. They give these limited time stations, like they're doing one of Billy Joel right now, where they feature his music, but they also have interviews with him talking about his favorite music and playing those songs by artists that he likes. So there's a lot of that sort of thing that goes on. I think people like to get inside the heads of some of the music stars out there and see what they're listening to and maybe what's influenced them over the years. So this Dollywood one is kind of fun. It's not a regular broadcast station, but it is a quote unquote, still calling it a radio station. So we cover that sort of stuff here on the Radio Report.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, our sun this week was rather quiet most of the time. It did have some solar wind coming from a coronal hole that is pretty large, and that has created at times unsettled conditions, but nothing very serious. Conditions were overall not too bad, and I think in the week ahead what's going to be interesting to look at is two sunspots that are growing fast, 4135, 4136, that have all that is needed for solar flares. So that will be something. But there's not a lot of sunspots on the sun. It's kind of a little quiet. We still have the coronal hole that's sending fast solar wind that could also create a little bit of disturbances in the radio. The sunspot number 72, the solar flux 129. And the only way that you can witness all of these changes on the radio waves is to turn on a radio and listen.
I'm Thomas Witherspoon of Asheville, North Carolina, and you're tuned to the International Radio Report, 30 minutes of news about radio on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Our next story is a follow-up to a story we'd had on last week's program. The headline is Liberian Court Charges Local Traditional Leader for Abducting Journalists. You remember last week we talked about a journalist that was abducted for broadcasting secret things about a secret society within Liberia. Well, we've got the follow-up to that this week. And strangely enough, the Liberian people do speak English. Somebody needed to learn that this week. We won't mention who, but anyways, that's besides the point. The Saniquilli Magisterial Court has charged the former Assistant Superintendent for Native Affairs in Nimba, Gabelia Duo, for abducting and manhandling a journalist. Duo was arrested and charged with felonious restraint, recklessly endangering another person, and simple assault for abducting the Dan language announcer of Radio Lewe in Tapita, Alex Yormi. On Monday, June the 30th, Duo, operating under the pretext of being the cultural coordinator of Lower Nimba, abducted journalist Yormi and tortured him throughout the night because he accused the journalist of discussing traditional matters on the radio station. The court document states the Duo's action was in violation of sections of the new Penal Code of Liberia. His lawyer secured his release on criminal appearance bond. However, due to the journalist's poor health condition after his abduction, as a result of maltreatment he received, the trial is expected to commence before the court on July the 14th. However, after a failed appeal to the victim to abandon the court action, the Press Union of Liberia and the Nimba Community Radio Station have both withdrawn their support, citing disrespect for refusing to adhere to their appeal. During his investigation at the headquarters, Nimba Detachment of the Liberian National Police, the defendant had requested the press union, through its president, Julius Kanuba, and its Nimba County coordinator, Christopher Fawn, for the case to be withdrawn for peaceful home settlement. Initially, Nikora President Kennedy Doma refused for the case to be compromised and said he wanted it to reach the court. But just minutes for the police to forward the matter to the court on the morning of Friday, July the 4th, 2025, Doma said due to numerous calls from stakeholders, the case should be settled at the police station, a request that Alex rejected. Due to his decision to see his abductors prosecuted, Alex has been left to fight for justice alone at the Senequili City Magisterial Court. Despite his reported abandonment of the court by both media institutions, Yormi has vowed to pursue the case to the end. So it carries on. We're not sure where this will go next, but back and forth as to whether they're going to press charges or not. Now it seems like everybody's backed away, and it's really going to be up to the journalist himself to pursue it any further.
Yeah, I mean, he seems very serious. Our next story, we have Finland's 252 kilohertz Arctic radio update. This is via Jorma-Mentila, ARC, Kangasala, Finland, and Arctic Radio Club News via Glenn Hauser's World of Radio IO Group. 252 Arctic Radio, Inari, is starting weekend test transmissions in August 2025. A Notel ND2000 transmitter was very kindly donated to the project along with its antenna tuning unit and antenna. It's the old Ivalo Airport 432 kHz Notel ND2000 transmitter, tuner, and antenna, actually. The station will start with just 500 watts, but the coverage should be around 300 to 500 kilometers, depending on conditions. Power will later be upgraded, says operator Matthew King. So this is going to be interesting. And if the power goes higher, we'll probably have an interesting coverage there in Europe. Will be interesting to tune the Kiwi SDRs and see if we can hear it.
Yeah, this will be something that's not been happening very often, is a station activating on the long wave band. So many stations have been abandoned on long wave overseas. So it'll be interesting to have one coming back on the air. So I'm sure some of the Finland DXers out there will be keeping tabs on that. They're a very active group over there. And the Arctic Radio Club News publishes a lot of interesting stories, actually, on events taking place in the northern regions of our planet. We found this really interesting website that we want to talk about today. This is from Thomas Nilsson's Shortwave Bulletin via Glenn Hauser's World of Radio IO Group. It's called Waves of the Past, and we'll put up the link for it. The unique Waves of the Past webpage allows you to tune into radio stations of the past, using receivers of the same age as backdrops to provide an authentic listening experience. You go to the page, you start by clicking on a model of radio, and they start like back in the 30s and they move all the way up through the decades. You click on the radio, and then there's little arrows on the screen, and as you click on them left or right, the needle on the dial of the radio that you're looking at actually slides up and down the radio dial. And as you tune it, the radio tunes to various recordings of radio stations from that point in time. So it's kind of like a Wayback Machine.
Yep.
You're going and tuning across the band on a radio, what it would have sounded like in the 1930s, in the 1940s, in different parts of the world. So you can choose from signals running from 1939 through the 1970s and 1980s. I don't know, Gilles, if you had a chance to look at it, but it's pretty impressive how they put this together.
It is impressive. It's very interesting. And, if you're a little nostalgic of the past, it actually brings you back in time in different eras and different broadcasts. It's very, very cool, actually, the way it's done.
When I first logged onto it, the needle on, I picked a radio, and the needle was at the end, at the beginning of the dial, and all you heard was the hiss, the static sort of. And I couldn't figure out at first how you moved it. Like, how do I get this? And then I saw the arrows and I started clicking and it starts sliding up. And it's really so authentic because you sort of, as you approach the frequency, you start to hear the signal come up. And when you land on the exact frequency, bang, it's there and it's nice and clear. So it is really like DXing sort of and tuning across the old radio dial to see what's on the band. I don't quite know how they did all of this. Obviously, they would have had to gather all these old recordings and to fit them in some way that they actually sort of fade in and fade out as you tune past them. I thought it was really brilliant the way that they've put this together. So we want to tell you about it and have you go check it out. The pictures of the radios are great too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you can tune a boombox, you can tune an old tube receiver. There's so many things. By the way, if you have a trackpad on your laptop or your keyboard, 2 fingers sliding left and right will also tune the needle on the radio.
Okay, really, really neat. It wasn't explained really, really clearly at first when I looked at it, and I couldn't figure out how you moved it. I just kept hearing that static, and then I realized, okay, that's what these arrows are. But I'm sure you'll have fun with this, so check it out, and maybe send the guys that put this together a note and thank them for doing this. It's really quite fascinating.
So we've got some amateur radio DXPEDITIONS and special events.
Yeah, a couple of these are actually gearing themselves up for a big contest coming up, which we'll tell you about next week. The Islands on the Air event, which is organized by the Radio Society of Great Britain, the RSGB. First from Mozambique, Charlie 93 Romeo Charlie on Chiloane Island. It is IOTA number AF-098. And it will be operating from the 13th to the 19th of July by Oscar Kilo 8 Alpha Uniform Alpha 3 Quebec Lima Charlie, and Romeo 7 Alpha Lima. They'll be on the HF bands using CW, SSB, and FT8, and they will have 2 different stations operating. So this is 1 Czech amateur and 2 Russian amateurs that are operating this station from an island in Mozambique.
Actually, if you look at the call signs, you'll notice that every year they go to some different spot, that same little team. So they seem to travel the world and have fun with radio. We also have SVALBARD Island, Juliet Whiskey Zero Victor, operating July 14th to July the 23rd, 2025. This is by Oscar Kilo 2 Whiskey X-Ray. There'll be 160 to 6 meters in CW, SSB, and FT8.
And finally, from DODECANESE, Sierra Victor 5, operating July 17th to July 24th by Whiskey Juliet 2 Oscar. And that will actually be the call sign that he's using, Sierra Victor 5 / Whiskey Juliet 2 Oscar. They'll be in the location of Rhodes. This is part of Greece, and on the HF bands. So look for them, and they will QSL via November to Zulu November. So these are 3 places that Svalbard is active. I think there's some regular resident hams there, but Mozambique and DODECANESE, 2 places that we don't hear stations from very often. So those will be some interesting catches to add to your logbook, either as a ham or just as a shortwave listener, tuning them in on the HF bands.
I'll have to try that. Mozambique will add a new country for me.
Very good. Yeah, not a lot of activity from there, that's for sure.
Yeah. So we are out of time.
We thank you for tuning in today. Lots of interesting stories. Do check our YouTube channel where you'll get all of the stories and the recording of the show. All of our links are posted there as well. So that's youtube.com/@IRR, and you can listen to previous shows there as well. Our email, if you'd like to get in touch with us, radioreport@yahoo.com. If you have any stories that you come across, please let us know about them. We may include them in the show. Our show is live streaming and archived at ckut.ca, and we have our Facebook group, always popular, 985 members, still working our way towards that 1,000 mark. Please consider joining the group on Facebook. Look for International Radio Report. Have a great week, everybody. Stay cool. It's certainly hot here in Montreal, and stay safe. We'll talk to you again next week here on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.